round 4 of the HWS webinar. I'm Buzz. I'm chairing the Better panel, which you can tell because panel B stands for Better. That's Ben. He's on panel A. A stands for, I don't know what A stands for. It doesn't stand for Better. All right, welcome to round 4. Let's get the show on. I welcome the Prime Minister to introduce my stands in
There is a way that this round is fun and easy to adjudicate, and there's one where it's an absolute shit show. Largely, it's going to be around the idea of what sorrow means, right? Like, we contend that sorrow is prolonged, it is deeper than any kind of like trivial sadness, and most importantly, it sits at the forefront of your existence. That is to say, sorrow defines your ability to interact with the world. It literally sits upon your mind in a way that like a passing sadness because you saw something that made you kind of sad like a movie is very, very different, right? We argue that things like sadness and guilt are very divorced from this. That is to say that you can still feel bad about something without that being sorrow, something that literally, say, affects your ability to interact with the world. A couple of observations before we get into the matter. The other thing is that we are talking about adults, someone who is 30 years old, who has largely at this point developed norms about who they are, learned whatever lessons they're going to learn, and has an identity about things that they prefer, don't prefer, things they do, and norms or what they care about has largely been established. The last thing to say is that sorrow, largely, when you cope with it, is meant to cope with the idea of loss. We argue it would be preferable if you never had to anymore. That is to say that the value of sorrow is dealing with future sorrow. We contend that that's not valuable if you don't have to deal with sorrow at all. 3 things in this speech. The first is talking about why you all prefer a higher quality of life over some conception of sorrow and misery. The second thing is about structural sorrow and why we necessarily need to be able to fight that. And the third thing is how society gets better. Structural sorrow. It's going to be exciting. We say that sorrow is uniquely non-productive. That is to say that it literally sits on your mind in a way that prevents you from being able to interpret your own ability, interpret things that you can or cannot do, and adjudicate how the world around you is responding to your inputs. We say that your quality of life must be the most important, and any rational actor would try to preface as best they can the life that they live. Recognize that emotional health shapes everything about how you are able to function at all. We say that it affects other people in terms of like how you are treating them, the things that you would prefer or not prefer, but also in terms of like how you view your own abilities and what you think you can do. The biggest thing here, and the clearest link, and what I'm guessing you're expecting, is that it impairs rational thought. It impairs your ability to make a rational decision that maximizes your own utility and the utility of people around you, and we say that that's hugely problematic, right? Recognize that continuous sorrow is linked to things like depression, and that literally prevents you from being able to like live the quality of life that we presume any rational individual would love to live.
Is there a reason why you don't deem sad emotion to be part of the human desire condition? Or, in other words, would you also ban irrational exuberance that makes you feel really happy about things and makes you do things which you might not have done in the absence of that emotion?
Cool. So recognize that this isn't a ban of anything. This is what a rational adult would do. We say that irrational exuberance, or whatever that great word was something that like people would naturally say, yes, maybe I want to feel those feelings. We contend that no one wants to feel sorrow, and that particular form of irrationality is hugely problematic, right? If it's an irrationality that means that you buy a cake that's slightly more expensive than you otherwise would, we say that's different from the kind of irrationality that prevents you from feeling like you can say, go to college or interact with other people in your life. We contend that that's really important. Later on, please. Furthermore, we say that the reasonable person should hedge against the worst case scenario. What do we think that means? Listen, no one can predict the future, and we say that literally tomorrow your entire family could be killed. And so because you literally have no sense of what like your epistemic odds are, like crazy shit happening to you, that you should prefer a situation where you're hedging against the worst case and where you can't do things like feel like you can get out of bed. We contend that you should prefer, even if it's like a smaller probability, ensuring that your like average quality of life is likely to be significantly better off. And avoiding things like survivor syndrome, you should minimize these kinds of harms. The second thing to say, though, a separate strand on why you should prefer quality of life, is that it's often the case that other people depend on you. There's an intuitive version of this, which is like, if you are a 30-year-old and have kids, or intend on having kids, that those children may depend on you. Anyone who's dependent on you needs you to be able to make rational decisions and working in their best interest. But there's another version of this, which is just the people around you. First, it's like hard for them to interact with you in the sense that if you were being particularly like irrational, given this type of sorrow, like we argue it's hard to plan and interact with this person. The other thing, though, is that you're likely to not be able to help them, not be able to be the best version of you in terms of any version of good that you think is important. Yeah, go ahead.
So you assert that people wouldn't want to feel sorrow in the future, but what if I'm really concerned at the prospect that I could lose a parent and not feel any upset about what had happened?
Right. So we argue that sadness, feelings of guilt, or like thinking about whether you should or should not have said in the last moments, is significantly different from sorrow. We say sorrow is hanging and deeper and long-term in a way that doesn't make sense. We say you should be sad about your parents for a day and then move on. We say it's a better world what people do, and that people would be happier on net, would live happier lives, have greater utility, be able to protect other individuals if that was the case. The second thing to say, though, is we think that there are parts and individuals in society who suffer from sorrow that exist because of structures within society. What does this mean? There's been extensive research on African Americans and Hispanics in parts of the United States where they literally see rates of sorrow and things like emotional conditions like this linked to the idea that people don't believe society belongs to them. They've lost out on access to institutions and things like colleges and schools without role models, and they see that as a reason to not try. Literally, sorrow can be something that permeates throughout a culture or society or area or people that prevents them from feeling like they can be the best version of themselves. We think that's horrible. And when you get rid of the ability to feel sorrow, we say we empower individuals to take on things that they realistically could do. Recognize that there are tons of Hispanics, tons of black people in the United States that could go to college that never applied. They're plenty smart, plenty talented enough to be a better version of themselves, but never try. We say part of this, not all of it, and we recognize there's plenty of other structural problems involved, has to do with the idea of sorrow, a literal feeling that society has been lost to you and those opportunities just don't belong. We contend that it's a better world where you don't feel this. The third thing to say, though, is that society in general gets better off in a world where people don't feel sorrow. We argue that society, and the way that individuals respond to sorrow, is either A, the thing that we talked about in the short term, which is largely a paralysis that prevents you from acting in a positive way for yourself. But we say sometimes the long-term reaction to sorrow is exceptionally reactionary or incendiary. That is to say that, like, say a bomb goes off, your reaction to the feeling of sorrow might be to target some certain type of group, to cover up that extreme pain with extreme violence or anger or passion in a way that we say is problematic. In hindsight, talking about this exuberance, if it was the case that this extreme type of feeling was one that would result in you making bad decisions for other people, voting for things that were incendiary, voting for things that could lead to literal harm to other people, think invading places like Iraq is a great example, we argue that we would like people to not feel that feeling as well. I'm incredibly proud to propose.
I welcome you, leader of the opposition.
Okay, so in my speech I'm going to look at two areas. First of all, I'm going to talk to you about how sorrow is the converse of value. Those are mutually constitutive things, and if we do not feel an intense sadness or sorrow about losing something that was very important to us, that's a sign that we don't have a value for that thing in our lives in the first place. Without sorrow, we say, a sorrow of losing the most important things to us, we lack those things being important to us in the first place, because that's what it means to value something. That's my first argument. The second one, I'm going to talk to you about sorrow being an ethical check on behavior and the importance of feeling sorrow for others, to be a responsible human being. Before that, though, some extraneous rebuttal. Most of it will be integrated. One, the stuff about, well, people can feel a little bit sad, but that doesn't count as sorrow. Like, it's like the response to every time that we point to a really important and valuable use of sorrow can't be, oh, well, that can just be sadness. It's just like a touching feeling like when you tell a white lie, but it doesn't affect you that much. The important thing is that in certain cases, it is appropriate to have a very, very profound emotional reaction, because that reflects the fact that the thing you lost wasn't just a little bit important to you, but was really quite totally important to you, right? The idea that, oh, well, it's fine. Like, people might not want to be, to grieve for their parents for the day and then move on to it on the Tuesday, because they might think that that's not going to reflect the totality of what they lost, right, when their parent died. You have to have a proportional response to the thing that you valued, and if you just shut that down to like a really small amount, then that's a sign that the value, on the other hand, is also being shut down to a really small amount. Then finally, the stuff about like sorrow undermining aspiration, because people are so miserable about their lives that they don't try hard. We think there are other ways to fight that feeling in society rather than deadening your emotions. The way you do that is by having, say, black people politically organized around understandings of the value of what it is to be black, black beauty, black pride, and sort of challenge that kind of overwhelming negativity that people might have in situations through affirming people's positivity, right, and creating stuff that is valuable to them rather than deadening their sense of value, full stop. Okay, so on the philosophy of sorrow being constitutive of value, we are not utilitarians in the sense that we think the only thing that matters is your emotional state in life or how much dopamine is in your brain at any given moment. Rather, we think that what is a sign that your life is going well for you is things like, do you have good relationships with people that you care about? Do you have a sense of purpose and meaning in your life? Do you live in a clean and safe environment? Do you have power and control over the most important things that happen to you in your life? We think that those things are ultimately what makes people's lives good, and very few people are attracted by the prospect of taking a ton of pills that flood their brains with dopamine if it means that they never get any of those other things in their life. That shows that there's something other than emotional states that is ultimately a sign of what's good for somebody in their life. Yes,
so are you positively having fun at this tournament, or will you only enjoy it after it's concluded and you've lost the experience, like retrospectively looking?
Well, it is true that sometimes people enjoy things as they progress, right? And that's obviously sometimes a sense of value. But often you find that that's not true of the most important things that you're constantly exposed to, like relationships. So very often, right, people will take relationships for granted, right? While they're hanging out with somebody, like they're getting some sense of pleasure, but they're not getting a real sense of like the meaning or the value or the fundamental difference it's made into their life, the fact that they have this connection, until you lose it or you lose it temporarily. That's when people's like, oh, I didn't realize what I had until I lost it, right? That kind of feeling is really, really common. That's the type of feeling that also motivates right behavior, like the recognition that, oh, I lost a friendship before and that was like a devastating experience, so in future friendships I'm going to safeguard myself from that type of feeling by maintaining the relationship as it goes. Like often people realize actually it's the loss in which it becomes most transparent of what the value that you were getting before was happening, because it's such a steady stream otherwise, and it kind of goes into the background of your stuff. But importantly, the important thing about here is that sorrow is not a negative impact on people's lives. It's the loss of the relationship, right, or the loss of the thing of value that was negative. And the sorrow that people experience is just actually a reflection of the fact that what they had was good when they had it. That's a really important piece of information for people to get, because that's what gives people the sense of purpose in their lives. Yes, opening.
On the idea of constituents about value and sorrow, do you believe that the only way that an individual could feel pinnacle happiness would be if in their past they had been genocide?
Sorry, what?
If literally a genocide had been attributed to had been done against their people, that's the only way for someone to feel the maximum amount of happiness.
Absolutely not. So we're talking about having something that was valuable and losing it, and like the type of story that gets generated when you lose something that's of value. It's not just that like sorrow is the only thing that causes happiness, but when we're talking about the types of things, as I explained, that make your life good, often the most profound, the most common forms of sorrow are the things that happen when that temporarily or permanently gets lost, and that's a thing of value for people. It's not just that like sorrow is the only thing that's clearly relevant. In situations in which people don't get that acknowledgement that they had something of value, which is the most transparent way, that's when people lose purpose and they lose a sense of, oh, I've had something good, or I've had something valuable. When we're talking about sorrow, we're talking about the most precious components of somebody's life, and that acknowledgement is really important. So that defeats the arguments that we heard on side proposition, which is, people wouldn't want to feel this way. We say often that they would. And secondly, the stuff about your dependents being, like you not being able to look after them. Because like people who are economically desperate don't give up doing everything in their lives just because they feel so sad. People find methods of coping if the need is very urgent, but also because we've shown to you the extent to which your relationship with your dependents would be really different if you were like, oh, well, I'm not going to miss these people if they're gone, right? Secondly, on the ethical check of people, we say feeling sorrow for others in a deep and profound way, right? When you see the most horrific images of war or of starvation, becomes an important motivating force. Now, what we heard in saying proposition is, well, people might sometimes make the wrong decision. You know, you might choose not to invade a country when actually it was the best thing to do. That's a question of education and sort of letting people work out what the most efficacious response to the feelings and the impulses that they have. Nevertheless, you need to have people with that motivating force to kind of care about others in order for them to sort of enter their kind of mental calculator of what they should do, rather than just like push them off the radar, and being able to feel sorrow for others and see, like having that tug to do something to assist people who are in urgent need is a really, really valuable way of doing, like getting people to behave more ethically, and that's okay. So we'd like to
I welcome the Deputy Prime Minister.
So I acquired my disability as a result of an accident. And when you get this particular disability I have, you can make a decision. You can have an operation which like effectively numbs the side of your body and reduces paralysis, or you can just be in pain for the rest of your life. Now that's a pretty critical decision. That's going to shape the rest of your life. And that's probably something you should be pretty damn rational when you're making, because it's going to influence everything you do. The distinction with sorrow, with any other exuberant emotion that they're going to bring you in potentially closing, is that sorrow necessarily happens at critical points in your life where something profoundly has changed, and where you're going to need to rationally respond to that change in order to maximize the quality of your life in the future. Often these are not reversible decisions, so like in the case of operation it isn't. In a more universally applicable decision, like when you know if your partner suddenly dies, what to decide what to do with the children, like if someone is orphaned and you decide to adopt them. Often the critical decisions made at the juncture where you feel sorrow need to be absolutely rational, because they can have impacts that far outstretch, and that's why we need to maximise rationality above all else in those moments, because that's going to affect the rest of your life. Okay, let's have a look at what we heard from side government. Okay, so basically the speech boils down to this premise that like the way that like in order for things to be valuable, we need to feel sorrow. In order to recognise that like something is valuable, you need to have sorrow. Recognise that like the idea that something you have to feel sad about something to have value is like societally arbitrary. We have decided that we're going to assign sorrow as the metric that we can use value on. We think that is not necessary, right? We think you can do, we think there are other ways that are equally impactful, or like at the very least like, mitigate a lot of their impacts, which like you can still use to ascribe value to things. So for example, in some cultures, a parent dying should not be a sad thing, because they're going on to a better place if you believe in reincarnation, or if you believe in heaven. That is an equally valid way to conceptualize a loss of a parent, but it does not have all the economic externalities of sorrow that David brought you. We inside of government do not see a reason why you necessarily need to feel sad, and why this should be the way we arbitrate value in society. We actually think that ascribing sorrow to like loss of value can be incredibly negative, right? It creates huge pressure certain sorts of conformity, or certain sorts of like actions when you're meant to be in a period of mourning and you face social pressure, social stigma if you don't conform to that. So for example, if for whatever reason you're not sad when your parent dies, because you believe in reincarnation, you think they're in a better place, because you didn't have a good relationship with them, or because you don't feel the same depth of emotion with someone else for whatever reason, you face like very real stigma, and you're expected to act in a very real way, or else you face societal condemnation. We think that's really bad. We think you should divorce this. We should divorce expression of value from expression of sorrow. That leaves more people to be able to recognise value in the ways that they see fit. We think that in just a second, we think that the current society that subscribes sorrow to value is like negative.
point of information.
So you seem to paint a picture of a fairly diverse society. What reason do you have to believe that everyone will take whatever treatment this is and judge your behavior with regards to this funeral, whatever it may be, in a different light as a result of this? Or why does everyone else change their perceptions just because you've made a decision?
So it's a compound, right? Given that we think that this is probably available to everyone, we think like a large portion of people, like it will probably be a mixed bag if the space splits, will take this pill. So we think that like there will be like some sort of interaction. We think comparatively you're like to face less social stigma, and there are more diverse views in society. We get more diversity on side of government. Okay, so then we were told to talk about like how sorrow is like a learning experience, and like it can teach you like how to value friendships better. A couple of responses to this. First, by the time you're 30, I acknowledge you do lots of learning after. We think you've learned like a number of critical lessons. We think like you have like basic patterns of behaviour like are somewhat erased. We think that mitigates that point somewhat. But also again, we don't think that like learning from your mistakes is the only way, like by feeling sad about them, is the only way to prevent making those mistakes in the future. I can recognise that a friendship had value, and I want to continue to add value to my life without having to make me feel sad, right? Like in the same way, like I can want to get a good mark in a test, and so I can study very hard and go the extra mile for it without feeling particularly sad if I miss a mark. We think things can be additive. You don't have to have lost something in order to like, want to add value or want to add happiness to your life. We think people have all the same incentives to maximize their own happiness. So if making a decision like doing something different next time, like continue to maximize your happiness, we think you will do it irrespective of whether or not you feel sorrow. Okay, so then they told us that, so then we had this idea that like images of pain are what motivates us. Like, I don't think that like many people like feel deep and profound sorrow when they're looking at like videos of children. I think they probably feel sad. I think like the fact that the West has managed to like, do nothing about Syria for 4 years is probably pretty indicative of the fact there's a pretty fleeting presence in people's minds. I argue that like wanting to intervene can aid a rational response, but that like basic empathy isn't something that's necessarily dictated by sorrow. Bash.
Yeah, so your analysis that you just gave ignores the fact that, ignores the description that I gave, which is that sometimes the most important and fundamental items of value are things that people take for granted because they've always been exposed to them, and you only realize the value that they had when you miss them, and that's something that you never get to realize if you don't experience sorrow.
So I think you do, right? Like, I think if I had a boyfriend who I depended on for emotional needs and I cheated on him and he broke up with me, I could recognise without feeling sad that my emotional needs are no longer being met, and the next time I should probably not end that relationship because it adds value to my life. I don't think I need to be profoundly sad about the loss of that boyfriend in order to come to that rational conclusion. Okay, now look, we think that like even if you buy that like you do get value from sorrow and that like sorrow can add something to your relationship, you should still prioritise the arguments we've given in your government. Why is this? Because of the analysis that I gave you right at the beginning of the speech, which is that sorrow occurs at the moments that are often critical junctions in your life that are going to affect your life for years to come. These are often things that you can't control. We think that like if you make a bad decision at these points in your life, or like if you make a decision that you're unhappy with, it's like to have like long-range impact, which impact the way you can make relationships in the future, which impact the way other people can make relationships in the future, and which are otherwise critical, right? We think that like when you weigh this against like the lessons that you can learn at like preserving relationships, they can to an extent be mitigated by rational circumstance, which wants to maximize your happiness. You should always prefer this because they cannot get rid of the irrationality and the bad decisions that often people make when they're experiencing deep sorrow. No, thank you. We can therefore use to prioritise our instances where because of the haphazard nature of this sort of thing. We think that this is particularly person when we're talking about any person who's like a part of a minority, who's a part of a group that's going to have to struggle more, right? The analysis that David brought you, their only response is like they can do it other ways. Like our whole point is that if you're really sad and think it's pointless to politically rally because like, going to places and races no matter what, you're less likely to do that on your side of the house. Right? It is particularly important that like minority or people who are going to face a lot of sadness in their life have access to this because it means that people who like most who need to like continue to work even when things are hardest, right? Like we think it's incredibly demotivating to be like depressed all the time, to like experience systemic racism and all of that sort of stuff. We think that like these people are going to have to work the hardest in order to better their own circumstances in order to better the life of them and their children. We therefore think it's especially pertinent that these people have access to the ways to cut things off. But finally, we think that people have a right to decide what is prioritised for them, right? So let's say that like we think that people have a right to make their own way up and then decide that things don't like that sorrow doesn't add a lot of value to their life, right? We think that people can decide what emotions are important to them, they can decide what feelings are important to them, and people can therefore make the way up that like sorrow doesn't necessarily add anything. So what have we brought you outside government? We showed you that like sorrow causes rational decisions. They haven't actually seen that this happens some of the time. Given that we've impacted you, how these impact your life of others, and the life of society a bit large, particularly with our point about reactions and how it influences voting, we think we should weigh this above all else. We're very proud of it.
I welcome the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
So one of the major claims that we've heard from government is that we need to eradicate sorrow because it is that which causes people to act irrationally at times of loss. And I find this argument's a bit weird, right? Because first we never really got a characterization of this mass systemic problem of people acting irrationally or how that harmed their lives when they are in positions of sorrow. It also presumes a pre-existing human mode of behavior of perfect rationality at all times other than sorrow. And that's clearly untrue, right? Human beings are irrational most of the time, and it's not clear why sorrow, as opposed to any other emotion like anger or guilt or happiness, creates other forms of irrationality. Moreover, we think that there are often benefits that sorrow brings at times of loss, which can lead you to create correct decisions, such as by showing you what is important and valuable, by teaching you how to be compassionate, by giving you moments of self-introspection that you probably otherwise wouldn't have, that I'm going to come on to develop in my speech. that actually when you're thinking about what is best for your children in times of divorce, being motivated purely by rationality cannot lead to the best decision. Being motivated by compassion for your partner, for your ex-partner, for yourself and for your children can also all play into the position of making that correct decision. There's also the question like, they come across by saying that you can have value without feeling sorrow because as long as you feel sadness. That's not true, right? Because in that way, that you would value your parents the same amount as you would value a debating competition, because if you lose either, then you'll be sad for a day. That clearly doesn't lead you to understand correctly what is meaningful to your life. In order to be able to prioritize that effectively, you need to be able to understand the true value of meaningful relationships to you. And they say, yeah.
Right. So the point of sorrow being based off loss is that there's nothing you can do to repair the problem that has caused this sorrow. So why is it the case that learning about something you can no longer fix actually meaningfully changes the options that are available to you?
Because actually, in a lot of ways, you can meaningfully fix things. When you lose a parent, what that teaches you is how important your personal relationships are. And you then might take better care of your partner afterwards, or maybe take better care of your children. Or maybe that you're the one lasting parent that you do have, you'll realise how important it is to spend time with them. So it gives you all of those indicators to remind you of what's hugely important in your life. Moreover, the correlative of this is that you fundamentally don't care, right? We have this nonsense that well, if you believe in reincarnation, they're not sorry when their parents die, but that's clearly not true, right? Even if you believe in reincarnation of the afterlife, that doesn't mean you're not intensely sorry when your parents die. So in order for you to not feel sorry when your parents die, that at least at the point of their death means that you must transition to a point of indifference to them. Because if you can say that no longer matters to you, then all of the memories that you have of that person, the memories you have of that relationship, how fundamental it is to you, is manifestly, it's significantly diminished in your mind in order to make this logically possible, right? That has to be true. Also the stuff that they said about the impact of sorrow on your rationality and on your ability to function, which I don't believe that's really true, actually. Times of great sorrow are often enormously productive for a number of reasons, right? One of them is let's look at all of the creative works about history. If you ever read Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky wasn't exactly the most happy-go-lucky guy in the world, but he managed to create a work of immense beauty. If you look at all the paintings, literature, music that are motivated by deep understandings of sorrow, and the way that sorrow allowed that person insight into the human condition, compassion to other humans, and allowed them to create these beautiful works. And again, I completely agree with my partner Crash, right? If it's a choice between taking pills to make me happy every day, but it doesn't matter what I do with my life, I'd rather feel sorrow and lead a good, productive life where I contribute to the rest of humankind. The other one is compassion, right? It is human nature that if nothing shit ever happens to us, it's really difficult to empathize with people who that happens to. If you've never been through a divorce, you have no idea why that person is so upset when they get divorced. If you've never lost a family member, you have very limited ability to have compassion with people who've lost their family members during war. So one of the major important things about sorrow is it connects us to other human beings and allows us to be compassionate. When you lose your parent, when you lose an important relationship, when you lose something that's fundamentally, say when you lose a job, right? Then you suddenly start thinking about all those other people who've been unemployed and think, actually, maybe we should do more about benefits. Maybe actually now I can empathize a bit and understand how terrible this is, and it's not that easy for everyone else. Maybe this is something that we should focus on. Similarly, if you've lost a parent and you see on the news about all of these people who've lost their parents in war, then actually it means it's much more meaningful to you and allows you to interpret that through much more compassion. So actually, we should probably do something about this. So compassion, it doesn't just make you a better person, it makes the world better. The only way that society functions in progressively where we each care more about each other is because we each are able to understand sorrow, and as a result that forces us to look again at the conditions of others. It also leads you to contribute more to society. If you look at all of the people who lost their children either to disease or through gun accidents and then devote their lives to causes to make that not happen, either fundraising for diseases or campaigning for gun control, and that becomes a really important part of their life, and they make society better by doing that, right? Note that if without sorrow, they wouldn't not lose their child. They'd still lose their child, but they would no longer have that emotional benefit, that emotional stimulus to make something good out of that, to change the world for the better. Also in terms of personal development, yeah.
If someone is outlived by their partner of 50 years and as a result never loses them, is that relationship less meaningful than a brief fling they had when they were 17, which did end?
Obviously not, because but even if before you die, the consciousness that that person might die or might leave you, and the sorrow that you know that would bring, because if you think about it, if you think about your partner leaving you, if you think about your parents dying, you feel that sense of sorrow, that fear of that sorrow, and that causes you to then think, this is something that's really meaningful and valuable to me, and it's something that I'm going to treasure. Also the fact that you never then get to that stage at the point where they die, and you then have to transition to them being made meaningless in your mind in order to facilitate not feeling sorrow. Then I want to talk lastly about the importance of sorrow to appreciate the inverse, right? So all happiness is relative. If the time you get an A in a paper is less meaningful each time you do it, right? So someone who never gets A's, the first time they get an A brings immense happiness, but there is an attritional rate to that. So someone who never experiences sorrow, it's human nature that the extent of happiness they feel, each incremental happiness is less and less and less. And that means that you never actually get to the stage where it's ever enough. That's human nature, right? You never earn enough money, you're never happy enough. But what sorrow does is that necessary corrective. That if something happens, you feel sorrow, you have that time of personal development where you think about what matters to you, the next time that something good happens, you're able to feel that kind of slightly perfect happiness again. And then actually that's what you're going to be losing. Because you'll never, if you lose sorrow, if you lose the ability to truly understand loss and its meaning, you never really appreciate the happiness that you could be living your life with. Yeah, you might have everyday like high dopamine, whatever, but we all know that's not the true happiness that we're all aspiring to. And that's what you lose if you lose the inverse.
I welcome the new member of government.
Opening governments say that sorrow in certain situations makes you make bad decisions, to which opening opposition says, but yeah, most emotions are bonkers, right? Lots of people make bad decisions for a variety of reasons. So we want to focus on from closing government is A, the altruistic capacity that you gain without having sorrow, the power that you have to improve people's lives, where you're the one person immune from the despair that captures everyone around you in bad situations, and why that's incredibly valuable. And second of all, why sorrow as an emotion that captures our things is intensely bad in restraining our freedom and free agency, and why it specifically in the pantheon of emotions that restrict our judgment should be considered evil. Before that, two pieces of rebuttal. First of all, opening opposition was like, but art, we can make Dostoevsky's next novel and cool things will be great, right? Like, first of all, if you're one person, like, odds are you're not a great artist, right? It's a particular individual. But second of all, like, I think this actually gives you a really unique perspective. You're the one human being alive who cannot feel sorrow, right? The one person whose emotions differ from any other human being and has a different perspective on the world, right? If anyone's going to be more likely to produce good art, it's probably you, not everyone else who has exactly the same emotion standards in the world. So I think that's actually on our side. Second of all, on sorrow being the core nexus for the way we feel value about things. A, I do not think the only way to value things is to lose them, so we incessantly POI opening opposition, right? There are things like positive emotion, enjoyment, compassion can be born out of positive experiences. And as we just pointed out, by the opening opposition's logic, right, you would have to weight a relationship that did not end as less valuable than one that did, by virtue of something that has not been experienced in the second relationship. Their defenses would say like, but you apprehended the sorrow and the loss in the future, right? Presumably that's nonsensical, because you never actually felt the intense emotion of sorrow that we're talking about as being valuable. You just had the pre-apprehension of that loss, and you had some like different emotions that were riling the sort of thing. But second of all, response to this, like, I think there's a critical distinction between the experiencing self and the remembering self, right? So the self they want to talk about is the remembering self, right? They think that what we should value is being sorrowful about a thing, looking back at it, and gaining value in that sense. We think that's an incredibly dangerous thing to rely on, right? That's the self that is murky about the part. It forgets that the relationship was dodgy and focuses only on the good things because those that are lost, and you're very emotional about the situation. The experiencing self is a far better mediator of what actually is valuable, right? Because you think about what the experience was like holistically. You're not captured by the loss in the sense that the things you can drive and make you feel regretful are particularly more important. So I think this argument does not stand. First of all, an altruism, and this will also deal before that sort of closing.
The comparison is not between the two relationships. It's between two lives, one with the relationship that broke at the age of 17, which I suspect made the future relationship, which lasted so long, so much more sweet because of the fact that you could treasure that human being.
I don't think that's necessarily true, right? You can treasure individual experience, you can think very carefully about the experience, or you can be trapped by the murkiness of looking back on an experience, and whatever your emotions and your sorrow tell you was true becomes true, and that traps you into certain things. We would prefer that people focus on the proactive things, the things that actually will happen in their lives, not on some murky concept of what happened in the past. On compassion, First of all, I think there are other routes to compassion than simply through sorrow, right? Things like, fear is like a cousin of sorrow that does a lot of the similar stuff they wanted to talk about, right? Or, failing that just like positive experience and like really seeing and enjoying someone's experience and empathizing with them because it makes you happy to see them happy, right? Those are things that can lead you to emotions. But I think in particular, this debate gives you as an individual a particular gift. It makes you a rock where everyone else will fail, right? Let's be very clear. Everyone in their life, right, has situations where everyone around them, their close friends and family will go through incredibly traumatizing situations, right? That is when a family member dies, for instance, maybe a relationship with someone you deeply care about, and like lots of bad things happen. Opening government's take on this is like, well, you can do better stuff for yourself. We think a higher moral calling, and something we care very deeply about, is your capacity to help other people in those situations, where everyone else is uncertain about what to do, right? Where everyone else is trapped by their sorrow and emotion, you are the one person who remains like steadfast in these situations, right? You are neutral to the emotional responses that trap other people into certain decision making, and you can put a comforting hand on their shoulder and help them when no other person would. We think this policy is morally necessary in as much as it gives you the unique capacity that I'll take you in a second opening that no one else in your world, in your life would have to be immune from the dangers that trap other people, even if that meant sacrificing some quality of your own happiness. We would prefer that over simply prioritizing ourselves or other people. Sure.
How can you get a sense of whether or not it's worth it to ruin a whole environment for a group of people to get an economic benefit if you don't have a sense of what it would be like to be on the receiving end of being in an environment that was important to you that was ruined?
Because in true Simpy fashion, you would obtain a lot of data and you make an objective decision about the pros and cons of the situation, as opposed to being trapped by the overarching emotional. Let's think about how, what you've just said. Like, a lot of your case was the experience of sorrow through broken relationship is important, and you want that core of decision making to be applied to economic judgments about the environment, right? I think that is presumably very divorced from what the actual realities on the ground are and what the important deciding features of that situation are likely to be. Just because empathy sounds nice does not mean that it is a utilitarianly good thing or something that we should value. Second of all, why losing freedom is particularly bad. I think it is important to recognize that even absent from the very specific cases opening government want to talk about where bad things happen and you need to be defending yourself against other bad things that might happen in the future, sorrow has three particular evils. First of all, I think it is an evil core of decision making. It is emotion that grabs us and consumes. It's quite vicious compared to other emotions, right? It subsumes all other feelings and your capacity to make rational decisions, not just because it is a strong emotion, but because it often traps us into circumstances of feeling chronically depressed or chronically unhappy. And that means that as a thing that we could allow either to or not control our decision making process, we should view it specifically as evil, right? It's not like happiness that could be fleeting. It's not like fear that is very temporally localized and then dissipates in the future. It is an emotion that consumes entirely. So across the pantheon of emotions, we should specifically view it as bad. Second of all, I think there is no reason to presume that the natural emotional responses of people are good. I would specifically observe that the things that we value and the things that cause us to feel sorrow are very often culturally defined, right? For instance, there is often intense pressure to feel sorrow over your parents dying, even if those parents were not particularly good parents to you, right? Or even you don't necessarily would feel that emotion, but for the cultural things that cause you to find that sort of thing. I think that very often the things that make us feel sad are things that we are tricked into thinking should make us sad, right? Because there are cultural norms and expectations that tell us that these are meant to be the core defining terrible experience of life, and you should feel trapped and particularly bad about those sorts of things. I think that given that, it is a particular moral consideration to think that we should try and free ourselves from those things, right? Given we cannot control where our emotional core comes from, we should be very, very cognizant and very, very scared of letting those emotions take control of us in the way that sorrow necessarily and perniciously does. So this sort of, taking this pill is incredibly useful. Last of all, I think it's because, sorrow is it goes beyond other emotions in much it has a long temporal effect, right? There are certain, what they said was that sorrow is an intense period of discomfort, right? It extends for a large period of time. Unlike other categories of emotion, which can often flip on and off, sorrow in particular spans far beyond the capacity of where it would be reasonable to assume that emotion was applied. Because you don't just feel sorrowful in the locale where it might be useful emotively, you feel it for a longer period of time and traps more of your decision-making process. We propose.
And welcome the member of opposition.
relationships are often the most important things in our lives. They give us stability, they give us a sense of who we are. They are people around us who know how to make us happy, how to avoid what makes us sad. Empathy is at the bedrock of most relationships. We need to be able to understand the emotions that other people feel and have in order to build those relationships. If you cannot feel sorrow, you are unable to build relationships around this most important and deepest of emotions. And because of that, it means that we should not take this pill. There will be 4 steps in this argument. First of all, why losing the ability to feel sorrow means an inability to feel empathy in these important cases. Secondly, why the loss of empathy negatively impacts those relationship interactions between you and other people. Thirdly, why that means you lose a depth to relationships, or you might even lose certain relationships. And fourthly, why relationships are the most important thing in our lives. Just two pieces of rebuttal and then a comment. So for rebuttal, first of all, we never really got from closing government a sense of what bad decisions sorrowful people make when they're interacting with other people who are sorrowful. No, thank you. It was never clear to me what kind of spreadsheet would aid you when looking after a grieving parent. I don't know what kind of rational decision making they have in mind. No, thank you. And secondly, on this point about freedom and cultural pressure, maybe it'd be nice if there wasn't a cultural pressure to feel sorrow, but they said in their own extension that you're like the only person who does this, and everyone else around you feels sorrow. The cultural pressure isn't going to go. You're going to get all the same opprobrium as before, no thank you, but now you're unable to feel that sorrow. It means you're more likely to get the cultural opprobrium that they cared about. Next, the comment. So how it is that our point no thank you, empathy is different from opening opposition. Their claims are about how your empathy means that you see other things in the wide world, and because you've lost a child, maybe you campaign social activism. That might be right to our only one person, but ours is about the individual level relationships with those around you. Opening.
Right. So a 30-year-old has already experienced sorrow. Your opening said that being able to imagine sorrow allows you to value a relationship. If you can imagine future sorrow, then that means you can empathize the emotion without actually feeling it.
Yeah, so that brings me to this next point, but really briefly, it's because one, you're not being able to recall the feeling of sorrow if you can no longer feel it, and two, you might not have experienced it. But I'll do that in a bit more depth now. So first of all, what do we mean by empathy here? So this involves sharing the feelings of another person and adjusting your actions sensitively in light of their feelings. You're now going to be incapable of doing this when the emotion you're empathizing with is sorrow. Why? 2 reasons. One, you cannot directly feel their sorrow. The most important case of empathy is when you see somebody who's bereaved and you feel sadness directly for that. You see them grieving for their child or their parent. And that means, and so that's the first sort of sense of empathy, and that's one that you definitely lose in response to that POI. But secondly, there's a sort of lesser kind of empathy, but still one that's really important, which is where you're not sharing the sorrow directly, but you know what sorrow means. What does that mean, understanding someone's sorrow? To do that, you have to recall it. You have to say, what did sorrow feel like? But when you are recalling an emotion as a memory, you have to bring up that feeling. The only way of understanding the sorrow is by remembering what the feeling was of that sorrow. But you can no longer feel it. You've deadened it. You might be able to say, I remember that I couldn't get up in the morning, or something like, I sort of remember that I was like unable to motivate things, but you cannot remember the intensity of that feeling because it's impossible. You've taken that away. Okay, that's why you can't feel the empathy. Step 2, what does this do to your relationship interactions? One, most directly, you can't just get a sense of solidarity from that shared set of emotions. The idea that someone is sharing the pain with you and they understand you, and that's a direct form of relationship solidarity. But secondly, and really importantly, you now cannot provide comfort to, say, your surviving parent or to your grieving friend if you do not know what's exacerbating their sorrow. You need to be able to read their emotions. You need to know when to talk about the person they've lost, or when not to. When to avoid a topic, or to change the topic. When someone needs to be left alone, or when they need somebody around. These are all things that are absolutely key in helping people cope with their grief, cope with their sorrow. No, thank you. And all of that comes from really understanding what that sorrow is, and being able to share their feelings. All of that, and all that comfort you can provide is lost. Something which both government teams said that most other people in the world are still going to feel this sorrow. So, this means you've lost certain meaningful relationship interactions. What does this mean? Step 3, in terms of lost relationships. So, first of all, there's just going to be a direct harm to those around you. So now it's just no longer the case you can provide the appropriate kind of comfort and support to your surviving parent or to your friend who is grieving. So that means, in a moment, that again, their just happiness, their welfare directly drops as a result of this. And we think that we should care about them and our ability to help them. Yes.
So you still have every other emotion in your whole repertoire to sort of build an understanding of what you should be doing in that situation and empathize with them, right? Why specifically do you need the kind of all-consuming sorrow to be able to have any empathy at all?
So it's not any empathy at all, it's specifically empathy for sorrow. So the example you gave in your speech was, oh, we can still feel like anger at injustice. Sure, but I don't think anger can help when somebody's lost a child. I don't think that like general feelings of happiness or euphoria, or maybe the transitory sadness that opening government talks about, is going to help you understand this most significant and most important of emotions. So that is what you have to lose on your side. That's the feeling you cannot understand. But secondly, and for you, like as us, like self-interestedly here, we're going to lose a certain kind of depth to that relationship which comes from this solidarity, from this most intense of emotions. Because as government wants to keep pointing out, this is a particularly intense and important emotion. And so it's in the depths of sorrow that we forge our closest relationships. If anybody in this room has suffered from grief or deep sorrow, I'm sure you can point to one particular person who really got it, who really helped you, who really understood what you were going through, and that shared history makes them one of your closest friends. But you can also point to a friend who did not get it, who did not understand, who wasn't there to help. No thank you. And those are the people with whom we start seeing those bonds start to fracture. So we get the closest kinds of relationships forged in the depths of sorrow. But point 3 here, some relationships are just going to break down because you're going to feel insensitivity. There's going to be a sense that there's a feeling that your behavior is inappropriate. If your parent dies and your brother has taken this pill and just feels no sorrow, there's going to be a real sense that they are doing something wrong, that they misunderstand. You're not going to want to be around them if they're going around their lives feeling kind of happy or saying, I can kind of get on with it. Certain relationships are going to break down. So you lose certain relationships and you lose the depth of other relationships. 4. Why is it that these relationships are so important and more important than transitory sorrow? So we can just think here, at the moment we do have a choice at the moment between sorrow and relationships. We could, if we wanted, become a hermit, not have any friends, try and cut ourselves off from family, or not found future families. That will cut off loads of possibilities for sorrow, because you're not going to lose future friendships, you're not going to lose your children if you never have them. And yet, most people choose to form relationships. Why? It must be because we think these relationships are ultimately more important, more valuable to who we are, more constitutive of our identity than the possibility of transitory sorrow in the future. So because our own interpersonal relationships are the most important thing, because we need to empathize to keep those relationships, because we need to feel sorrow to feel empathy, oppose.
Closing opposition act as if there's a universal understanding of sorrow, and that the sorrow that one individual feels when they lose a loved one is going to be the same for all people, something that they're going to be able to perfectly understand and empathise with. What we tell you in closing government is that's not how emotions like sorrow work. They're different for everyone. People experience things in different ways, and your own understanding of your situation doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to place yourself in a situation to assist with someone else's sorrow. We believe that what you need to do is just be there for that person, be a dependable rock for them to lean on, someone who can talk to them, who can empathise that even if they don't understand the exact emotion that they're going through, that they are willing to help them out and are willing to empathise with them and help them. That's what we believe is most important, and that's why closing opposition's analysis falls down. 2 points in this speech. First, how does sorrow affect you as a human? Secondly, how does it affect the way that you interact with others and what occurs to those other individuals? First, what affects you as a human? So the analysis that was brought to us by opening opposition was analysis that would mean that someone who had never had a relationship end because they died before that partner passed away was less meaningful than one that did end, even if that was much less important to them and they gained far less from that relationship. The response given to that was, but it's different because you anticipate the sorrow that you're going to feel. What we say to that is that first, if you anticipate that sorrow, then you get all of the benefits in terms of being willing to empathise with people and all of the positive social action that they want to talk about. But furthermore, if you're able to fully anticipate that, you've likely been conditioned to anticipate that even though you're not going to specifically feel that. Because this person's been living for 30 years. They've been conditioned to understand that sorrow might be something that they might face and are likely to act in the same way in terms of valuing that relationship because they know that one day it might come to an end. What we do is we remove the actual feeling of sorrow that debilitates people and leaves them unable to cope emotionally, that means they're not able to move on, that means they're not not able to place themselves in the world and have an understanding of who they are. And that's the key difference here. What we allow people to do is go about their normal social interactions, but without the hugely negative ways that people face sorrow in their lives. Furthermore, when you're in a relationship, you're often able to empathize with people just based on the fact that you care about them and are there for them. Look, when people face a loved one dying, they react in hugely different ways. If you go to a funeral, there are some people who will cry, there are others who will not. It doesn't mean that that outward expression negates any understanding that they might be suffering in some way. And indeed, you do suffer in some way when you lose a loved one. It's not as if you just go, so even though I think OG put it pretty flippantly in terms of you go for a day when your mum dies and then you move on, the reality is what you will do is you will miss the relationship that you were able to have for them. You'll see that you no longer get the positive aspects that would have otherwise existed. And that's still a harm to you, and it's something that you're able to appreciate and understand. That's still something that you're able to deal with and as a result empathise with. And different people might be so faced with the shock of losing a loved one that they're not able to fully comprehend what that means for them. The fact that that individual isn't necessarily feeling sorrow at that point doesn't mean that other individuals aren't able to reach out to them and relate to them, because they can still relate on the fact of the many other common experiences and emotions we feel. The fact that they're no longer going to be able to relate to the good times they had in the same way. They're going to be able to look back at the good experiences they had with this person and see what is being missed as a result. Opening.
So all of your analysis on the kind of person you'll be if you take this pill rests upon an assumption that human nature is highly altruistic and highly empathetic. Is that really realistic?
Yes, we think that most people do empathise with other people. They see relationships around them as being important. And even if they didn't empathise with them, there are self-interested reasons to maintain relationships in society. Now let's look at how this affects other people. So what they've tried to do in opening opposition is predicate a lot of their case upon the fact that people are going to go out there and actively try and make a difference as a result of this. So the example they give is like, if your child gets shot, you're going to lobby for gun regulation because you feel sorrow as a result of that child dying. We believe that's something you're still highly likely to do. You don't have to feel a deep loss at the sense that they're gone and miss them constantly and feel immense suffering as a result. You can simply look at the fact that you had a child who was able to bring you pleasure, you no longer have that individual in your life, and that they were important to you and important to your life. Relationships still exist and can be seen as important because we still allow people to get all of the positives out of those relationships. And we told you that the meaning in relationships often comes from the positive comfort and support that they're able to get, which means that that brief fling they had when they were 17 is less important than that lifelong relationship they're able to form. That's why that example is so important for showing why people are still going to want to act for positive change, but they're going to be far more likely to do so because they're not so debilitated by their sorrow that they're able to think, okay, what positive change can I cause that is going to be able to make a difference and is ultimately going to be able to help myself, help society, and help other people. Yeah.
Thinking of a lost child as just a bundle of costs and benefits is likely to make you say a faux pas like, well, why not just have another child? I don't think that's going to help you build a meaningful relationship if that happens by mistake.
We think that is highly unlikely because this individual has lived in society for 30 years. Even if they haven't experienced the death of a loved one or the exact scenario that you're talking about, they've related to people on the basis of their sorrow, they've experienced emotional highs and lows, and they understand, like, even if we ignore all of this, that there are some basic relationships which, if they say certain dumb things, that people might think they're odd. Look, even if we took the worst case situation, someone would know that other people are feeling this and they should act sensitively around them. As a result, people moderate those conditions because what their case is based upon is that people use the emotion that they felt in the past and re-experience that when they imagine someone else in that situation. We don't think that's what happens because people often are in a very different emotional state at the time they're suffering sorrow as opposed to when they might be helping others who are experiencing that. You're far more likely to get the general notion that you were in a terrible place, that you felt bad, that having someone there to help you was good and useful for you in that situation, but you don't relive every single moment, you don't relive every thought, and that's the difference here. People are still able to have that basic knowledge that these emotions exist, that they affect people and see the practical consequences on their lives. They don't need to relive that and actually suffer themselves to know that they're able to help people around them. We allow people to be a rock for others and really help them out. That's far better than debilitating people as a result of this extreme and unnecessary suffering.
I welcome the opposition witness.
Two questions of summary. First, what the average person cares about in his or her life, the answer is a relationship. Second of all, how do we go about building these relationships in deep and meaningful and hopefully permanent ways? Before that, one bit of rebuttal. The last bit of stuff from Gov I want to deal with is the idea of the rational choice. Because both benches say, both teams in the bench say, your rational ability to make a decision is impaired after a tragedy because of sorrow. We've asked them, look, if you think so much of the problem is culture-laden, what goes away exactly when you take sorrow away? The same reasons for sorrow underpinning that sorrow was to put pressure on you to make those decisions. That's what Tommy said. We didn't hear a response. So I suspect that last bit of John's material falls out of the debate. But if it is really about culture, and we ask this to opening as well as a point of information, what is a more valuable rational choice? Because I suspect to a human being who has to live with a range of emotions, an emotion-laden decision does not make it a bad or irrational one. We've asked this bench again and again, what does a bad decision look like? I suspect a bad decision is one which isn't in accord with what your desires are. But what all this policy, all this motion, all this pill does is change one set of desires for another. We've never heard a reason as to why one set of desires, no thank you, inherently better than the other. All right, first question, what does the average person care about? I'm just going to quickly get through, at the best case scenarios for opening teams, what they show. So opening government at its best show that in times of tragedy, which I suspect most human beings already discount because they're irrational, things might go slightly better. Opening opposition's case was about philosophy, was about art, was about relationships and how you interact with the world. We suggested that, given the motions, it kind of sounds like an active debate, but even if it were, the most telling thing in your life, the thing you have to deal with in your daily interactions is living, no thank you, as a social being. Tommy suggested that's the trade-off we make by choosing to do social things, like stay in a city and stay in a society. That's what we're refusing to give up. That's a key part of who we are. I therefore think the way you should view this debate, as we suggested, is which side gives human beings that best prospect of living in that society. So, second question of summary. How do we build those human relationships? Let me quickly illustrate to you what this government bench would have you do for the sake of moral aims, lofty aims of fixing the world. The closest test case we have in the real world to what this would look like is a sociopath. Perhaps this would be a more limited sociopath in the sense that only one emotion would be taken away, but I think we can infer some things about how this person would act. In the absence of emotions, most sociopaths can't simulate, they can't artificially pretend, despite their rationality, despite the fact that they are rationally aware, in fact often in many cases hyper-rational, about the costs and benefits of how society views things, they are unable to perfectly simulate the appropriate response. Before I tell you why that's so tragic, opening.
So you talked a lot about empathy in times of crisis. Different people perform different functions in times of crisis. Why would a friend's ability to perform practical tasks like planning a funeral or making you food be necessarily alienating?
They might not be alienating, but they, as Tommy suggested, don't give you that connection which makes someone feel this person was there for me. That's the bedrock of a relationship. Well, at the very least, it's not the only one, but we think it's a significantly important one. Because without it, it's hard to form a good relationship. But also, if you fuck it up, there's a good chance this person won't want to talk to you or see you again. So, the illustration here is this. If your girlfriend has lost a parent, is it right for you? Is it appropriate to act normal after a day? Or if someone has lost a child, as I asked Tom, is it appropriate to? Or are you likely to be in a state of mind that goes, just add another one, no thank you, because there are different sets of costs and benefits that could come about there. And I suspect maybe you could do it right the first time, maybe you could do it right even the second time. But over a very long period of time, this takes a toll on you and the relationships you've been trying to build. We heard 4 responses to this. If I can take on these 4 responses, this point stands. The first response from closing government is, why can't the anticipatory effect of this make a difference? That is to say, if you felt it in the past, why can't it help today? The answer is embedded in what I've told you. Simply because you felt that emotion in the past does not give you the emotional resources and capacity to know what to do in the heat of that moment. The fact that many people have different needs means that you can't simulate from the past what the appropriate action would be. The only way to do that is to genuinely share that sorrow with them so you can, intuitively as a human being, determine what the right thing to do is. The second challenge they gave was, well, why this emotion? What does it have to be sorrow? And I suspect the answer is embedded in everything Duff has said, for the reasons that it is not just practically utile, it is not just temporary, no thank you, it is deep, it is lasting, it shows a degree of empathy. I have 3 specific responses to this. The first is, as Tommy tells you, the reason it has to be sorrow is because that's what the person you're trying to empathize with feels as well. The connection is far stronger when you share that emotion as opposed to a simulated or an artificial one. The second response is what John says. He says, at the end of his speech, that this is different because it's not just useful in this locale, it is non-utilitarian. And for that reason, I suspect it seems more authentic because it's not just a generated emotion for a day to help you put on emotion. Sure, thank you. Third of all, as Tommy has suggested, because the closest relationships are built in sorrow. They're not built in emotions like happiness or glee. They're not even built on like emotions of guilt. I can share guilt with someone, and like if I rob a store with them, that doesn't in any way make me a meaningful participant in that relationship. So, we've shown you thus far why it can't be anticipatory. We've shown you why it has to be sorrow. Third challenge was closing government's extension. You can be a helping hand. You can sort of like reassure them you can be a rock. No. But this sort of presupposes that people want you as that rock. That all there is to human connection is a physical function of patting someone's hand and patting someone on the back and just sort of physically being there for them. Okay, perhaps that's useful, no thank you, but it seems to me like that's a very non-exclusive benefit. What is a bit more exclusive is knowing what the right response is, the appropriate response when after you put a hand on their shoulder, they want to talk to you about these things, they want to take these things one step further. Again, the illustration of a child makes a lot of sense. If you don't know what the right response is, you're very likely to screw this up, and I suspect that you being there for them and doing it badly once makes you a poor candidate to do that in the future. So, it's unclear that people want to come to you for emotional solace when that emotion that they're trying to share with you is lacking. Go ahead.
So you're not a sociopath, you have every other emotion and 30 years of experience. The only thing we deny you is the incredibly isolated experience of deep sorrow. And I just think that my relationships with my parents and my partners haven't been based on being sorrowful, it's been based on love and positive stuff.
Okay, cool. But our point here is that the sorrowful cases might not be the bedrock or the initiator of the relationship. But the inappropriate response, when you're the only human being in a world in which everyone thinks sorrow is the right response to a tragedy, can make things go very, very wrong. So we don't have to show that that sorrow builds every relationship, but we can show you that it's a candidate when acted upon wrongly to destroy every relationship. The last response that CG says is, well, but sorrow isn't the same for everyone. It can be different for everyone and so on and so forth. Cool, but surely this gap is bridged, right? On the comparative, we bring people far closer. It's a very obvious basic level response. But more importantly, Tom's response to a lot of our material is that the reasons making you sorrowful will continue as before. You will continue to think of what you've lost going into the long run. You will continue to think about societal pressures making you act the same way. Can you see why this is a huge double bind? Because all the reasons they've given that underpin sorrow, if they're going to use that as a defense of why things won't change that much, that's also an attack on their side. It's also an attack as to why behavior doesn't change that much on their side. It's also an attack as to why social norms continue to impose these things on people. And that is all to say that if you're going to live in a world in which all those relations are going to exist anyway, it's far better to have the ingredient of sorrow, because that's what gives you permanent meaning vis-a-vis other people.
Thanks, speakers, for a great debate. Cross out your hands, head outside. Where is